Today is October 7th. This is the Energy and Environment Committee. I'm joined by my Vice Chair, Mr. Blumenfield, and by Mr. O'Farrell. We have a quorum, Mr. Prieto, so why don't we go ahead and begin, if it's okay, with item number 1. I do see that we've got a speaker's card, so let's go ahead and take the public comment on this item first.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Item number 1 relates to Department of Water and Power CAO reports relative to proposed amendment number 1 to an agreement with Ethos Energy Field Services relative to services for the Castaic Pump Storage Power Plant.
Come on up, Mr. Spindler. We'll go ahead and take public comment. 1 minute.
Of course it's 1 minute. Yes. Ethos Energy Field Services, LLC. Special site field work. Well, we don't know what it's going to be. It's a secret. So whatever's going to happen at Castaic Pump Storage Power Plant, please stay out of the area until the secret work is done. And it'll probably be done at night, maybe on Sundays, Sunday nights, because it's a secret. It's special site field work. How much is it going to cost? Well, it doesn't matter. The important thing is that the work must be done. And it must be done immediately and done in secret. And this company is going to be paid how much money? Well, I would move if you could ask them if they're here, if they could do it for free, because it's the city's got a lot of budgetary issues.
Very good. There are no additional comment cards on that item. It would have been a consent item, but for it being called special. Colleagues, if you have any questions, we're happy to ask staff, but if not, we'll go ahead and vote on it. Very good. So that item is approved. Item number 2.
Item number 2 relates to City Attorney's CAO and DWP reports in ordinance relative to amending the administrative code to authorize the board delegate authority to the general manager, Department of Water and Power, relative to natural gas.
If we could also have Dr. Pickle join us for this item as well, that would be good. Good afternoon, Ms. Webster.
Mike Webster. I am Executive Director of our Engineering and Technical Services Division at LADWP. And just a very quick summary on this is we are recommending a fix to our existing natural gas procurement ordinance to secure the reliability of the power system, especially during short-term market disruptions that can be caused by weather events. Currently, we purchase our natural gas for our generation fleet on a daily basis, and it's under that delegated authority under Administrative Code 10.1.1b. Now, this authority limits the price that can be paid to $20 per MMBTU. And normally this cap is far above what the market price is for natural gas. But what we're doing is we're proactively addressing a reliability issue, is that there may be times when this limit is not enough. And there is no time to change the ordinance when we're purchasing gas on a daily basis at 5 a.m. in the morning for supplies on the next day. So without the ability to purchase natural gas because it's above the limit because of a weather disruption, we are very limited in our choices, specifically to purchasing electricity. And there are times where we may not be able to purchase electricity at any price because of availability within the marketplace or congestion on the transmission system. And so we need that flexibility. And quite frankly, electricity can be far more expensive in some of those times. So this is all prompted by an event that occurred in February of 2014. In that day, the East Coast was experiencing extremely cold weather, and it was pulling all the natural gas to the East Coast. And gas prices started to rise to $4, $5, $6. We paid as high as $16 an MMBTU, very, very close to the limit. However, by the end of the transacting day, prices had hit $28 per MMBTU. We realized that it could happen again. And so that's what prompted us to look at, is there a way that we could move forward and get a limited authority in emergency situations to purchase above $20 an MMBTU? We also surveyed other utilities and asked, do you have limits on purchasing gas in emergency situations? And we could not find any local utilities that had a similar type of cap. And so today before you for consideration is a limited authority to the general manager or other high-level managers, the senior assistant AGM, or the division director, to purchase natural gas above $20 an MMBTU, but it's limited. It's not to exceed 15 days in duration, which really covers a weather event or any other type of market disruption. So we think that's plenty of time for that. It also limits the quantity, about 100 cubic feet per day. That's about 1/3 of our daily gas volume, so it's limited volumes, and we think that that is adequate, recognizing we purchase a lot of our gas on a forward basis, and we have some gas field production. And it requires that within 2 days that we notify key policymakers of what's happened, what the prices were, what the financial ramifications are, and to assess the situation. So that goes to our board president, the mayor, and there's a list of several policymakers that will be notified of the event. So we don't know if we're going to need the authority. This is something to address reliability, to prepare in advance, especially as we head into the winter months. So we thank you for your consideration. We're happy to answer any questions that you have about this.
Very good. Dr. Pickle.
We support the general concept of this and their freedom to buy on short notice. Disruptions in natural gas markets can occur within minutes and could obstruct their ability to conduct their business, so it's important they have this authority. The one change we would like is to have the entities cited for notice in the resolution be mirrored in the ordinance.
And so in response to that, John Clyde, if you could introduce yourself, but there was a very specific reason why it's not part of the ordinance that I'd like John Claude to address.
Deputy City Attorney Jean-Claude Berthet. The reason why we did not include the specific identities or offices within the ordinance is in essence to allow flexibility within the office of the mayor and city council. So when it decides to change committees or the names of committees, and within the office of the mayor, if they decide to reshuffle and rename organizations within its offices, that there is that flexibility. If it's within the ordinance itself, then you'll have to go back and re-amend the ordinance. So it really is to provide that flexibility to the government structure. The reso itself is the law of the Department of Water and Power, and it's required to abide by it. So it is sufficiently drafted, and the ordinance itself does provide for that flexibility for further changes.
So help me understand, I'm not understanding if we were to reorganize our committee structure?
Well, for example, one of the notices is to the chairman of the Energy and Environment Committee. This committee didn't used to be called the Energy and Environment Committee. So if you had put that in the ordinance itself and then there was a change, you probably would want to go back and change the ordinance to take into that account. But if it's in the reso, you don't have to do that.
So help me understand. So I feel like there's a couple of committees, and it's not to sound like a braggart here, but there's a couple of committees here that by and large don't change. So the membership of the Employee Executive Relations Committee, for example, always has certain committee members, irrespective of the name change, staffing that committee. It's the president, the pro tem, the budget chair. Same thing with board referred powers. This chair, whomever it is that occupies my seat, is always a member of the board referred powers as well. And it's my understanding that that's a creation of our charter. So the names may not be identical, but they're close enough where you know that you're talking to the chair of the Utilities or Energy Committee. So I don't see why we would be precluded from following Dr. Pickle's recommendation.
Well, there were a list of...
and at worst, you just amend the ordinance.
Correct, but just amending the ordinance is a process, and it takes time, and it just requires additional level of review and revision, and to come back and redo the order
for somebody like me.
Well,
so why don't we go ahead and because again, the board of referred powers, as an example, is one that is staffed by certain chairs of the city structure, irrespective of the exact names, unless I'm mistaken. Mr. Blumenfield.
Would a simple fix be just to name them and then say, or its successor entity? Therefore, if there is a change, You don't have to go back to the ordinance if there's clearly a successor entity. If there's not a clear successor entity, then it'll be a dispute, and then you probably will go back. But if it changes from energy and environment to energy, environment, and health in 3 years, not that you're taking that on, but some little thing like that, at least you'll have a simple fix.
Yeah, I think there's a workaround. I mean, because my concern is the delegation here. You know, we all love Marcy Edwards, but we want to make sure that we have the ability to have oversight over the utility. And so I think delegating it completely the way that's being recommended doesn't work for me, at least. I mean, we can take it to a vote, but there's got to be a way for us to. I think yours is the most elegant way, Mr. Blumenfield, to deal with it. Do we all need to come back and get the language right, or do you think that's enough for you to sort of fix it before we get to council?
If the language within the resolution is sufficient, then we could just use that language and insert it into the ordinance itself.
Into the ordinance?
And that should take care of the concern that you raised.
Dr. Pickle?
We're comfortable, and we think the institutional memory is better if it is in the if it is in an ordinance and the ad code.
Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Mr. Peretz.
Yeah, I have one question, which is, at some point, will we not be able to fill this in with renewable energy sources rather than natural gas?
Well, certainly our integrated resource plan is moving that direction, and we have a big lift this year now that SB 350 was signed today to figure out how we're going to incorporate 50% renewables. And I think that that's not the end. We'll be here in the future talking about how we're going to have more renewables, and as the technology develops to integrate more and more renewables in the system, it'll allow for further expansion.
So is there a hope that at some point we won't need this natural gas at all, and we might be able to use renewable resources to fill in when we're in this situation?
Certainly there's a lot of investment in technology that will allow that to happen. It's not there today, but the industry is certainly moving that direction as rapidly as possible. And we are involved in helping demonstrate some of that technology with energy storage, looking at different battery types, looking at compressed air storage, looking at different ways that we can integrate renewables. And that's a big part of our new integrated resource plan, is to try to figure out how we're going to address that 50% renewable objective.
Very good. Thank you.
Very good. So are we all copacetic? We know what we got to do to get the language right so we can get it into an ordinance? Okay, very good. Hearing and seeing no objection, that shall be the order. Item number 3. Oh, I'm sorry, there's a card on this.
Mr. Chair, the clerk wanted to simply clarify the action, so if we could do that again, or I could assist with it, however.
Sure, so I think you said it very succinctly. We're going to conform go ahead.
I could, so just to make the record clear, within the resolution itself, there is the notification process, and so we'll take this notification process that says, shall notify within 2 business days the Associate Director, Infrastructure Services of the Office of the Mayor, the Chair of the Energy Environment Committee of the City Council, the Chief Administrative Analyst of the City Administrative Officer, the Policy Advisor, Energy and Environment of the Chief Legislative Analyst, the Ratepayer Advocate of the Office of Public Accountability, the Commission Secretary of the Board of Water and Power Commissions, or similar position of the aforementioned city representatives. And that'll be the notification. We'll insert that into the ordinance as requested.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
Wayne?
Yes, and you can get more information about this tonight at 6 p.m. where the DWP is holding a special meeting tonight. And of course, Marcy Edwards, yes, she's the expert in buying natural gas. I mean, you just have to look at her resume. Explicit amounts of very vast experience in buying natural gas and getting the best price on natural gas. I'm really surprised. You don't trust Marcy Edwards? You don't trust the DWP and all the honest people, like their honest rate hikes? Shame, shame, shame. No, when you get something from the DWP, you just have to bow down to it and assume it's just absolutely honorable on the face of it, right? Because they're just such a well-run utility. So $20 per MMB, yeah, well, that's way higher than it is in the market today, isn't it, folks?
Okay, item number 3.
Certainly. Item number 3, DWP and CAO report relative to proposed agreement with Hazen and Sawyer for engineering and consultant services and development of the San Fernando Basin groundwater remediation project.
Very good.
Hi, good afternoon. Susan Rogani, Director of Water Engineering and Technical Services.
Bill Van Wagner, LADWP, Manager of Planning.
So what we have in front of you is a proposal, a contract to hire an owner's agent to assist us with the development of the San Fernando groundwater basin remediation facilities. And as you know, the San Fernando basin, the groundwater has been heavily impacted by contaminants, and which, as a result, we've been forced to close about over half our wells due to those contaminant issues. This consultant and the team has specialized expertise in groundwater remediation and will provide services to the Department of Water and Power in terms of contaminant plume modeling, evaluation of various treatment technologies, feasibility studies, looking at alternate delivery methods, regulatory and permitting support to oversee the design effort, and expertise giving us assistance through commissioning. The facilities are currently targeted to be online by the end of 2021.
CAO?
Well, our office has reviewed this request. Specifically, what's being approved is a 10-year contract with authority to expenditure authority up to $30 million. We support approval of this item and its in its current form.
Very good. And the firm that's being selected here, are they largely the project manager of the overall effort to remediate the basin, or are they the phase 1? What role will they be playing?
Okay, so Hazen Sawyer is the primary, it's a team effort, so they will be leading the charge with the other two other major consultants, which is Worley Parsons and Arcadis. They will be playing the role of the owner's agent to provide those basic the tasks that I listed. This is pretty much the second phase of our groundwater remediation strategy to help us to determine what type of remediation we are going to be using for the various contaminants in the basin. They will help us get to the point where they will have preliminary design, and once we get to that point, they will also help and assist in getting another firm to do the design and then the construction. So that would be the third phase of actually building the facilities. However, we'd still like them to be there during that process to help oversee the design, and also once the facilities are up, ready to be started, we want them there also during commissioning. So they will be there from the inception in developing these particular facilities all the way till completion and actually the startup of the facilities.
Very good. Mr. Blumenfield.
So they're going to be the ones looking at all this new technology that's out there. I've been reading some really interesting things about biodigesters for remediation and all sorts of sort of cutting edge stuff. So they're not wedded to any particular technology. They're going to survey the landscape at this point.
I think that maybe I should answer that one. While we are very interested in new technologies, the concern is to get these facilities online as quickly as we possibly can. So there are some limitations to what's called best available technologies, and those are the technologies that the regulators will approve. As part of our design, the way we want to have these designed, though, is so that it's a modular design, which means if a future technology becomes a BAT, then we would be able to change to a newer technology if it proves to be more economical in the future, to try to have that flexibility.
But right now, there's a standard set of what technologies are used. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah, the Division of Drinking Water, has specified technologies that are acceptable for, depending on the constituent that you're cleaning up.
Okay. So, gives me some ideas to look into something, but okay, thank you.
Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question in terms of, and kind of to tag along with what Bob just said, emerging technologies over the next 10 years, a lot is definitely going to change. That's one thing we can certainly count on. So do you have in mind what kind of process you might set up to report on the status of this 10-year contract, maybe to this committee, or has that been thought out?
Yes, actually, we will be reporting back to our board as we go through the steps. For instance, for the feasibility study, once that's completed, we will come back to our board, report on that. Also, we're reporting, because there's environmental studies that need to be completed, we'll again report to our board. We also have to report back at, when we let the contracts for design and construction, that's going to be something we go to the board. So we will be, at the various milestones throughout this process, be reporting back to our board to let them know how this is progressing.
Okay, and then we can report accordingly as required from this committee.
Sure, we'd be happy to.
Great.
Thanks, very good. We do have one speaker card on this item. Mr. Koretz.
What's the funding source for this? Are we expecting this to be funded by Prop 1? And if so, what's the status of our actually getting the money?
So basically, we have already applied for Prop 1 funding. There was a pre-approval that we put in a month ago, and we're also going to be looking at alternate sources of funding aside from Prop 1. There's also SRF funding, any type of bond, securitization. So there's various funding sources that we will be aggressively pursuing for this work.
Yeah, and also our legal team continues to try to identify potentially responsible parties, and we'll be looking for reimbursements to the extent that we can get them.
Yeah, at one point, Metropolitan Water District offered $20 million. Are we in contact with them at all to try and make use of that?
Yes, actually we have been working with MWD looking for kind of quick success projects that could be implemented. One that we're looking at right now, for example, is to see if we can get some of our contaminated wells within the Ronaldo-Toluca well field back up and operating, and we're reviewing a scope of work on that right now. We're still a few years away. We've got to get through the environmental process and the design process before this larger program can start to be implemented.
So how quickly can their money be used to start an earlier program?
Well, for this one, I'm not sure exactly how long, but it's much quicker, and that's why, again, we're focusing on that sort of a project with them. I don't think we have a timeline yet. We're still looking at the scope of work on that, but discussions are continuing on that.
Very good.
All right, we've got one card. Wayne?
Yes. Oh, that's so wonderful. The San Fernando Valley is going to get all that tasty groundwater to drink and bathe in. PCBs, yummy, yummy, yummy. DDT, lead, oh, yummy, yummy. Isn't that wonderful? Yes, that groundwater is just so good and ready to go, isn't it? Don't have the technology yet, don't have the design yet, but we'll throw $30 million. That $30 million is going to come from the customers. And that's why tonight at 6 p.m. they're having their final quote-unquote outreach meeting for a 5-year, 22.5% rate hike. So that $30 million will come out of that money with no problemo. You're never going to get that water out of there. It'll never be potable unless you take the scientific data, you pay somebody off, and they misappropriate the information, because that groundwater needs to stay where it is. It is deadly. It is toxic.
Very good. Wayne, don't go anywhere. We're going to go ahead and have you take 4 and 5 up next. Colleagues, if there's no additional comments or concerns on this, we'll go ahead and deem the item approved. Thank you very much. Items 4 and 5, Mr. Prieto?
Certainly, items 4 and 5. Item number 4 and 5 were both continued from your September 2nd meeting. They're both reports from Bureau of Sanitation and CAO in response to motions concerning the request backlog for pickup of abandoned waste and illegally dumped bulky items. You have reports again from Bureau of Sanitation and CAO on these matters.
Very good. Mr. Wayne.
Yes, they took actually these items up at the Bureau of Public Works Commission meeting. And I, again, like I said there, I urge everybody to come into Los Angeles, from out of state especially, and dump all of your waste. Bring it here to Los Angeles, because we're going to pick up everything, no matter who dumps it, no questions asked. It's the dumping amnesty of 2015. So all you have to do is bring your trucks in from Nevada, bring your trucks in from Arizona, Riverside County, and just dump it off in the street. And don't worry, Kevin James and his board will pick it up no matter how much there is. Woo-hoo! This is a real good stimulation bill. So, again, I like it. Coming to LA, it's the dumping ground of America, dumping ground for the homeless, dumping ground for waste. Bring it here. We're going to pick it up for you.
All right, let's go ahead and have staff come on up on items 4 and 5.
Good afternoon, council members. Mr. Chair, I'm Enrique Zaldivar, the Director of Sanitation. This is a continuation of the previous meeting in which you asked us, both us and the CIO, to come back with a number of report backs as well as an analysis of the recommendations we had made to you. The CIO has submitted their analysis of our recommendations, and I would recommend that perhaps, Mr. Chair, if it's okay with you, that we go over the CIO's part of the recommendations on their analysis of what we had recommended to your committee.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Wilson Poon with the CIO's office. So on September 2nd, your committee requested our office to look at recommendations 5 through 8 from the Bureau's August 28th report. Subsequent to that, the Bureau submitted a supplemental report which provided more information on the deployment of the 3rd Strike Team, as well as it revised recommendations 5 through 8. So what I'm going to do first is walk through each of the 4 recommendations. The first recommendation was to initially transfer half of the $1.5 million that's in the UB, the unappropriated balance, to sanitation to fund the 3rd Strike Team. This recommendation has been increased to $900,000 of the $1.5 million. The Bureau had initially proposed a 6-member strike team, but given the size of this backlog of service requests, close to 900 service requests, they are now proposing a 9-member strike team. Based on current existing data, each strike team is able to clear about 8 service requests a day, and using that statistic, they are estimating that this backlog can be completed by March of 2017. However, the Bureau did propose alternatives, solutions to clearing it sooner, if $500,000 in overtime, as well as the formation of a 4th strike team, would allow us to eliminate that backlog by April or May of 2016. Now, I do have to caution you and mention that this is based on current volumes of service requests, and that with the launch of the My 311 system, this number could increase, and so therefore these costs are based on current available data. And our office is recommending the $500,000 in overtime to allow them to clear that backlog sooner. Recommendation number 6. The Bureau had initially proposed 6 new positions to staff the 3rd Strike Team. They're now retracting this recommendation, and they're going to fill existing vacancies to form the 3rd Strike Team. Recommendation number 7. Initially, the Bureau had proposed to use half of the $1.5 million in the UB to expand the scope of work of the OCB graffiti removal contractors. This is really a hybrid strike team where they will partner with OCB graffiti contractors to do weed abatement as well as small litter removal. This funding will create 23 new jobs and provide, opportunities for members within the local communities who are considered at risk and difficult to employ young adults. Recommendation number 8. The Bureau had initially requested to fill 100% of the authorized positions. The way the city's budget is developed is each department has a salary savings rate, which reflects the number of vacancies and attrition in a given department. We assume that no department is ever fully staffed at any given time of the year. For the Bureau of Sanitation, their salary savings rate for their solid resources program, positions that are specifically funded by SWRF and MFBI, the Solid Waste Resources Revenue Fund, as well as the Multifamily Bulky Item Fund, is 5.6%. What this means is the department has to hold 64 positions vacant anytime during the year. In other words, these 64 positions are not funded. The Bureau is requesting funding to allow them to fill these 64 positions. Historically, the Bureau has had extremely high vacancy rates, which is why we've kept this salary savings rate at 5.6%. But over the last 3 or 4 years, they've made significant progress in their hiring as well as their employee retention efforts, and they've significantly reduced that vacancy number down to 134 vacancies, and probably 85. But they're at a position at this point where they are able to fill beyond that salary savings rate. In addition, it should be acknowledged that the Bureau has been requested to implement many programs such as Operation Healthy Streets, as well as the Clean Streets program, the street indexing program, and they did not receive any additional positions to do any of that work. So what the Bureau has been doing is reassigning existing positions from their curbside collection program, and therefore that's driven the need to use overtime and as needed to kind of maintain those current service levels. So we are recommending that for this current fiscal year that we reduce the salary savings rate, allow them to hire the additional 64 positions to backfill the routes. And that kind of concludes the discussion on recommendations 5 through 8. The rest of the report talks about other issues that are related to the CSI program. There was a public outreach program that was requested. The public outreach program would help educate residents on would educate residents on the city's the bulky item pickup program, as well as encourage residents to report illegal dumping. This program will be funded by the Sanitation Special Funds, and the Bureau reported that they will have a report back by December 2015. There's also been some interest in incorporating a surveillance camera program, and our office believes that this should be really done in the context of the city's budget. We weren't able to find enough savings with the $9 million that was appropriated in the UB to fund such a program, so we are asking that you request our office to report back with a more comprehensive citywide surveillance camera program, as well as what additional resources are required to kind of strengthen enforcement of illegal dumping. The next part of the report talks about the Executive Directive and the Clean Streets LA strategy. On March 18th, your council adopted the Clean Streets LA strategy. And subsequent to that, the mayor issued Executive Directive number 8. Both the council action and the mayor's Executive Directive have the same goal, but just different strategies in achieving those results. What we're asking is for you to instruct our office to report back with an analysis and reconciliation of both policies, and just to ensure that we're cohesive and the implementation is smooth. The last item on here is the source of funds. All this work is currently, our office is continually have discussions with the city attorney's office on the use of special funds to support any of these costs. But in the interim right now, there's about $3.6 million in SWRF that is budgeted for CSI, and what we're recommending is that we remove those funds and replace it with general fund money from the UB, the Reserve for Mid-Year Adjustments account. And we'll continue to have those discussions with the city attorney's office, and if we determine that any of these costs can be supported by the special funds, we will transfer those funds back. And that kind of concludes the report. The recommendations on page 8 of the report. We are recommending that your committee refer the report and these recommendations to the Budget and Finance Committee, given the significant general fund impact many of these recommendations have. We are also recommending that your committee instruct our office, like I mentioned earlier, to report back with a comprehensive illegal dumping enforcement strategy, as well as instruct our office to report back with analysis of the implementation of the Clean Streets LA strategy, as well as the Executive Directive number 8. Recommendations 3 through 8 are council controller instructions that we are recommending that the council authorize the controller to transfer the $1.5 million in the UB to sanitation and the Board of Public Works, as well as reduce the salary savings rate, as well as instruct the Bureau to expend up to $500,000 in overtime to eliminate the backlog sooner. That concludes the recommendations in my report.
Got it. So I've got a couple of questions, and you alluded to, I'm going to probably go in reverse order, so for those of you who are following along at home. So you mentioned sort of the budget and whether you can use special fund money or our general treasury money, and I'm going to be very careful about how I speak about this because the city attorney is here. Not because of the city attorney, I want to be cognizant of what we're discussing. But you mentioned that a determination has been made that we can't use special fund dollars, and we're going to backfill it with the city treasury money, and where we can, we will use special fund money. Mr. Saldivar, in his report dated October 1st, 2015, on page number 3, says the same thing, that the city attorney has determined that LA Sand special funds are not eligible as a funding source. I'm just want to plant a seed on all of this because I think that, colleagues, we need to have a real in-depth conversation, probably in closed session at some point, as to what a bulky item is. As simple as that may sound, the way that we're currently constructed makes it so that only certain dollars can actually mitigate some illegal dumping. And it's my contention that a SOFA is fairly agnostic as to where it comes from because it probably came from a ratepayer. So I think there's a way for us to figure out how to maximize the use of the SWRF fund, because the alternative is to continue to do what it is that we're doing. And it's not to say that it's bad, it's just to say that it's really slow. And so I want to plant that seed. We should probably talk about that in closed session at some point. But coming back to your recommendations in terms of how it is that we currently do things and how fast or not fast they are, coming to recommendation 5 here, if we were to approve all of this, and it's my sense that we're going to, when can we expect, Mr. Saldivar, to clear up the backlog if you get everything that you've gotten, that you're asking for here? Because here in the report in the CAO, it says that we can expect to have cleared the backlog utilizing overtime, and if we approve everything that's being asked for, by about March of 2017. Is that right?
March 2017, under one of the options, which would have been to stay the course with just 3, with the 2 strike teams. We believe and know that that is way too long, that you are not going to wait and have the patience, neither will the residents. So we provided an option that does not rely on adding additional staff. Instead, we augment the resources by working overtime. And so with 3 strike teams and working on a Saturday, every Saturday, we believe that we can eliminate the backlog as it exists right now, which is at about 890 some more complex types of requests, by April of 2016. And so, we have introduced this concept of mass balance on all of our operations, so we believe, as we have done with our regular bulky item program, achieve mass balance, that all requests that come in request our service on a real-time basis, based on our service promise. Same thing here. By April of 2016, we will achieve a backlog-less scenario where we will only be dealing with requests as they come in.
So I saw that in the report. So you're going to have a first in, first out response.
Yes.
And the mass balance sort of arithmetic to try to figure out how to get caught up. And if everything goes well, April of 2016. But and we're accommodating, if this is approved, to move you from a 5.6% savings in your department to 0%, which is a bit of a benefit. It means that you effectively have the ability to hire up to 100%.
Correct.
In this committee, we've had similar situations with the Department of Water and Power where we've given them authority to hire up as quickly as possible to deal with the billing fiasco that we had. And even then, we weren't able to, as a city, and it's not to point out the personnel department completely, but as a city, we weren't able to react fast enough to be able to mitigate some of those consequences as a result of the blow up of the billing system. So if we get you to 0%, allow you to hire up to 100%, how do we know that we're going to be able to CAO get them what it is that they need so they can get hired up and work on this backlog? Because that is the past work that we've got to work on. But at the same time, I'm out there, my colleagues are out there, and 311 isn't synchronized with your system wholeheartedly. There's a workload that's being generated concurrent to what it is that you're trying to fix with your backlog. I'm not terribly confident that we're going to keep pace with the ongoing demand and the backlog that we've got in a way that's going to be satisfactory. Now, it may be that I'm not going to be satisfied for a long time yet until the city's gleaming, but we witnessed this just last year in trying to get a department that had the authority, had the resources, but was unable to staff up. How are we going to get you staffed up? Now, the good news is that you don't have to hire an awful lot, but how do we know that this time next month you've got what you need? Because this is all predicated on being able to start on November 1st.
Yes.
It's for both of y'all. How are we going to do it?
Wilson. No. So, Mr. Chair, we're not pretending to say that by a certain date we will have at 100%, but I'll give you a good example that's occurring right as we speak.
But you are saying by April of 2016, if we approve everything that we can.
There's a multiplicity of steps that will happen because there's probably something like 30 or 40 different classifications that are involved in by the time this is all said and done, but one in particular that is occurring as we speak. We have a class of drivers coming on board. We either, under the old scenario of our salary savings, we either could have hired 30 or we could hire 50, or 35 and 50. By this approval that I hope you give us, we will hire 50. We don't have to hold the line for the salary savings because, it's always a risky proposition. And how are you going to achieve your salary savings if you say, well, I'll take a risk right now, the hell, I'll hire, and I'll make it up sometime down the road?
No, I'm aware of that. It's a huge benefit to the department, the flexibility that we're going to get you 0% salary savings, which means that you're unbridled, you can go do it. But we did the same thing effectively for the Department of Water and Power when we needed them the most. Even with having the benefit of having the chair of the Personnel Committee on this committee, we weren't able to hire fast enough. So how are we going to make sure that we're going to adhere to what is still a delayed, in my opinion, sort of rate of clearing the backlog? And then you have to tell me how it is that you're going to handle the concurrent workload that's being generated each and every day.
Well, that's why it's all of those fronts. It's, a good example would be the other mass balance in which when we reported to you back in August, the metrics on that particular program, which is a bulky item, we were looking at 1,900 requests per day. That was our mass balance. This week, we're looking at 2,500 requests per day. So, am I going to request for additional positions every time we see an increase? That's why I'm asking you for the full authority so that as those fluctuations occur, in this case increases, we have the ability to react. Now, is it true that every classification already has an exam in place that we can tap and hire from? No, that's not true. But we're moving everything in that direction.
So do you think that we'll be able to stay to the April 2016 date?
Yes, with the
even
qualification.
With the classifications or the tests and all that stuff that's still not 100% in order?
With the qualification of the metrics staying as we have estimated them. If we see an incredible additional increase beyond the metrics that we're using as a basis, our target is to meet that goal.
Okay. So let's jump to recommendation number 7. I understand why, how 6 works. So 7, we're going to partner, we're going to rely even more on our partners from the Office of Community Beautification, which I think is a really good thing. But when I look at the chart, I'm having trouble understanding how the math works out. And so let me just be a little selfish and look at Council District 7, for example. So I've got the Northeast Graffiti Busters that service a couple of council districts, and I have the Sylmar Graffiti Busters that do 2 council districts. it doesn't seem that there's a number that you're augmenting all of the OCB partners by. It seems like there's I can't tell sort of what the math is. So are we injecting 25,000 to each partner? Or is it how do you get that math? So take a look at the Coalition for Responsible Community Development, for example. They serve Council District 9, and that's it. They're getting $50,000 additional funding for their OCB programming. I understand that if you look at the presentation that you shared with us, there are parts of the city, including CD9, that probably need more help. But how do I reconcile that they're getting $50,000, and if you look at Sylmar Graffiti Busters, they're getting 25 split between two districts, so my share is 12,500. How do you? What's the math?
Good afternoon, Paul Roch, Director of the Office of Community Beautification, and two things. One, the original numbers came. We asked each contractor to submit a cost estimate for what it would do, and there was some range in there. But secondly, too, the contractors won't be necessarily bound by the same boundaries that they are for graffiti abatement. So, for example, Sylmar Graffiti Busters, if they basically just handle the Sylmar area for graffiti removal. But as we're looking at more of a regional type of plan, so there's no reason that they couldn't expand out into Pacoima or some area that Northeast Graffiti Busters covers as well, to kind of be a little bit more reactive to the specific areas. So, theoretically, if Sylmar doesn't have as much need as Sun Valley or some other area, we would have them move over there, say, like 2 days a week to help out over there. So we're looking at it as more of a regional type of service from the contractors.
And I should say that I'm, at least the folks that we've worked with, very impressed by. So much so that at the beginning of this fiscal year, I peeled off another $40,000 a piece, or I forget how much I sent their way because I need the help. And I don't regret it. It came out of my discretionary funds. They're going to get some more. But I don't understand sort of the math. To me, it seems that if we're going to weight it by backlog or some other way, that to me would be interesting and probably more rational than what I see here. I don't understand who gets what. But I'll trust that if I need additional help, you all will shift resources and move it into my area or Mr. Blumenfield's or one of my colleagues here.
Right, and the primary focus of these contractors is really to do litter abatement, weed cleanup, that light type of stuff. Leave the real heavy-duty stuff, obviously, to sanitation, but also that these contractors would be mobile, so after sanitation has gone through and done a large-scale cleanup, the contractor sort of on a routine basis could drive through those alleys or wherever they've cleaned. If they see one or two, mattresses or couches sitting out there, instead of waiting for sanitation to have to come and pick it back up, they just throw it in the back of their truck and keep on moving. So there's that sort of supplemental service to sanitation as well.
Yeah, no, listen, it is absolutely helpful. So the fact that you've got a giant bin at Sybil, for example, the Sylmar Independent Baseball League, when I load up the back of my truck with stuff that I find on the way to the office, I just dump it there. So to me, if we had more of those, that would be really, really good. So I'll let my colleagues in on all the fun here, but there's one other area that I wanted to sort of talk about. So, a big part of this is clearly the backlog. It's the concurrent demand that we're going to have to meet. And the piece that you will address, and thank you, Mr. Saldivar, in your report, is the education of the residents of the city of Los Angeles that there is a way for us to dispose of our bulky items. But unfortunately, I get a mixed conversation. When I tell folks dial 311, I have friends in sanitation who say, no, they should really call the 1-800 number on the side of the can. But when I'm on my run in the morning, I go ahead and I zap the sofas and all that stuff with my 311 app. What are we doing to reconcile these systems so that we really truly do have what Mayor Hahn had envisioned one call to City Hall. I
Yeah.
mean, what are we doing? And talk to us a little bit about the outreach that you're doing. I know that you're using the Conservation Corps and Pacoima Beautiful to do some outreach, but I don't see where you're outreaching to Council District 1 or 9 or 10 or 8 or some of the other hot spots that we saw on your map.
Well, thank you, Councilman. With regards to the uniformity of accessing a 800 number or we're moving to My LA 311. That's going to be rolled out very soon. Working with ITA, much of it depends on our state of readiness and sanitation to be able to be ready to take on what we expect an anticipated increase in requests. But let's say that rolls out in November. That will be the uniform way to accessing the service, My LA 311. From a phone number perspective, we carry both the 311 and 800-773 city. There was a time in which there was a difference in service hours where, we were 6 days a week. 311 was 5 days a week. We were working until 5 p.m. They were working until 4 p.m. So we are having more uniformity now in hours and as well as in coverage. So I expect there to be only one way to access the city, and that would be 311.
But when do you think that's going to happen? Because we've already outlived an entire mayoral administration, that made the promise. Another mayor came in, and it's my understanding that even the data sets aren't synchronized. So whatever's batched in a 311 call isn't necessarily what's batched on your 1-800 number. Those aren't even reconciled, right?
Well, My LA 311 will have all of that integrated.
At some point in the future.
Well, as early as November.
Okay. So
when it rolls out.
Okay.
It's not in the far future. It's already in the works. We're in the pre-launch stage. Our system is the same system as 311. The customer request management system is the same. It's uniform. So all of the attributes, the screens, everything looks the same in all of the customer care centers in the city, at least the ones who are in the first phase of My LA 311, which includes us, street services, street lighting. I think DOT is in it, but so that'll happen already in November.
Mr. Blumenfield? Mr. O'Farrell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of things. In terms of overtime budget, not to exceed $500,000, but what if overtime is exceeded once we roll out a third crew, which could very well happen depending on the number of requests, if there's a surge, for example?
Yes, so our best estimate is based on the data we have seen to date, Councilman. We made the assumption, and it's got an incredible benefit, where we would work all three of the strike teams every Saturday. That way we don't need additional equipment, we don't need additional staff. So it is our best estimate with some minor contingency and how we're able to bring the backlog down based on the metrics and how much the salary cost will be for the duration up until April. So we expect, again, I'm qualifying it based on the metrics, to stay with the 500,000 allocation.
So would it be accurate to say that you've already kind of forecasted out, and unless you start doing 24/7, like in the middle of the night bulk item pickups, that you can't imagine a scenario where you would exceed that allocation for overtime?
We do not forecast it, but you're right. Should there be some other unanticipated change?
And another question is, at the last Bureau of Sanitation report to this committee, it was mentioned about condominiums getting the service from the city, but yet in the ordinance, condominiums are not paying into the service. And there are tens of thousands of condominiums across the city, so do the math, and those are dollars that we're not receiving at all simply because of a glitch in that it's simply not in the ordinance. So wouldn't it make sense that since we're servicing condominiums for a bulky item pickup, that we start collecting those fees, monthly fees from them all? And how soon can we amend the ordinance to add condominiums into the line.
We, in fact, had asked that you instruct us to proceed with a proposal to come back to you that is better thought out, because right now we have been focused on the matter at hand, which is the stuff on the ground.
And I get it, and I don't want to, cloud anything here. In fact, I think I'm thinking longer term. We're going to need more money to do more things, or at least to catch up by April of 2016. And I would argue that $1.26 per unit per month spread across the city in the tens of thousands is going to generate some good income so that they can start paying for the services they're already getting and have been getting for however many decades.
We completely agree and would urge you to approve our recommendation to instruct us to proceed with a proposal. And if you give us till May of 2016 to come back with a well-thought-out proposal with all the data on, the actual population of the condominiums, the types of units, and all of the stuff that is important for you to know.
Terrific. And in moving this forward, are we indeed articulating that request as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of our recommendations. So if you approve our report with the recommendations, that will be one of them.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Cedillo.
Yes. Just for the record, let me say I want to reiterate your concerns about the funding and the resources that are available. As Mr. Fuentes stated, the SOFA doesn't distinguish what funding sources used to pick it up, nor do the constituents. The constituents have this sense that they pay money, they pay taxes, and they don't quite understand all the nuances that the city attorney has informed us that are involved in terms of picking up the trash, the blight, the bulky items that exist on the street. I do want to say, though, there was a phone call I took this morning from a constituent, and she was really applauding the pilot that we started of picking up bulky items in people's homes, and noted on 2 occasions seniors who would have been extremely challenged to get the items out of their homes, and were able to find a way through the 311 and the 1-800, et cetera, but were able to access the service and really praise the service because it enabled them to get the bulky items out and have stuff delivered to them and change the quality of life. So I do want to commend you guys for that.
Well, it was your idea, Councilman. So it's really
you executed, so I appreciate that.
So, I had an idea before I forget it, and I didn't write it down, which is why I originally had forgotten it. How many SOFA crushers do you have in your fleet, the compacting trucks? The ones that, so I've ridden with your folks, and they're amazing, hardworking, and they've got, pinstriping on their trucks, and it all looks great, and so one of them is called the SOFA crusher, so it's the one that you load to the front, and it compacts as it goes. How many of those do you have in your fleet?
We have about, this is Leo Martinez, AGM for LA Sanitation. We have the front loaders, which we have about 60 of those, and then we have about another 25 of the rear loaders that are bulky item trucks.
That are compactors. So I'm just wondering out loud, for the same dollars, if you have a fleet of 60, thereabouts, and you have personnel and we're willing to pay overtime, why couldn't we organize, like we do campaigns by precincts, a Saturday or 2 in OT, and just blitz the 892 as opposed to hiring or working 4 teams every Saturday that pick up 8 per team? I mean, it's a long way of doing it, but help me understand why we wouldn't just pay the OT now and blitz the list a couple of times on Saturdays or on a normally scheduled day off for these folks.
One of the main reasons is, and that's part of a good idea too. I mean, we used that as well on some of the backlogs that we closed out. The difference is that some of these locations that you're going to, there are these drivers, there's one truck, one driver. So when you pull up and you see a pile of rubble, obviously you need equipment, mechanized equipment, and that's where the CSI crews come in.
Right.
It's a different type of equipment. So some of our guys can get some of that, but the majority of those
the locations, especially the illegal dumping, requires mechanized equipment. The encampments are part of the backlog. That's
No,
different
I
process.
get it, because you've got hazardous materials, you've got bulky items, you've got construction debris.
Correct.
But we're, the old way of doing it was that you'd go out, eyeball the situation, and report back to HQ what kind of team you needed to go and pick that up, and you probably needed several vehicles. So if we're going to do that, why not blitz an area? So organize it like we do a precinct walk, just to analogize it a little bit. And so you have an area that Bob and Felipe are going to take the truck out. Normally it's one person, but now Bob and Felipe are going to work OT on a Saturday.
Let's do it.
We're going to blitz this area, and sofa, hazmat, construction debris, sofa. Well, that run, we're going to grab all the sofas, and then we're going to let the next team go, hey, there's hazardous on my little precinct here, you got it next Saturday, and just blitz the list for a couple of months instead of waiting through middle of next year to get it done. For the same kind of money, have we done the analysis? Because it seems to me that you could, it's a quantitative measures problem, right? And so to me, it seems like this might be a way of getting at it as opposed to just having 4 teams running around the city.
That's actually a great idea. We're doing that. That's what's happening now. The drivers are actually receiving these requests in their normal routing, and while they're out there in their normal routes, they may have 60 requests. 5 or 6 of those may actually get referred to CSI, which is added to the backlog. And those are the things that they go out and assess. If they're able to pick it up, they clean it. If they can't clean it, they refer it, take a photo, and they send it and refer it to CSI. So those requests that you're seeing in CSI backlog have already been screened. They've already been checked out by our drivers. They picked up all the items they could, and then that's the locations that they are requiring and requesting mechanized equipment or different equipment.
No, what I'm saying is no screen. I've got my regular scheduled day off on whatever it's going to be. So does he. We jump in the truck. You tear us loose in an area, and we come back and refer what we couldn't get in that area, as opposed to having 4 CSI teams out there working this backlog list until the middle of next year.
Yeah, in effect, the CSI are blitz teams. They're not going to randomly be looking for them. They will have a
There are 4 teams, though, right?
3.
3 teams.
3 strike teams.
Worse. So what I'm saying is you turn out your staff department-wide for the same kind of money. Instead of having 3 teams or 4 teams doing it, you turn out 60 teams on a regularly scheduled day off for them and pay them the OT and go get it done in a third of the time.
Well, yeah, and why we rely on the Saturday is precisely because during the week we got to maintain everything else on mass balance, including the requests that are coming in. See, the CSI backlog, Councilman, is not a steady, stagnant number. If we don't do anything during the week, it grows even beyond what it is right now.
I think this is getting harder than it needs to be. So you're a sanitation driver, and you pick up with the arm, and you have a route. How many days a week do you work? Do you work 7?
5.
5.
So you have 2 days off?
Correct.
Are they always Saturdays and Sundays?
Yes.
So how about if you then had the ability to suggest to everybody, guess what? If you want overtime on a Saturday or Sunday, we've got 60 trucks.
Absolutely.
And instead of relying on the 4 teams that are report-driven by CSI, now you've got a sign-up sheet and a bunch of folks that want to go pick up trash and blitz areas, and we monitor their success so that we're not just doing it onesie-twosies.
See, I think you were an operations manager sometime in your past.
It's a quantitative measures problem.
Because
it's simple.
that's precisely why we feel comfortable not asking for additional authorities, because the folks who work Monday through Friday could be available for working on Saturday.
But this doesn't tell me that they're going to be working Saturdays.
Well, it depends. See, we have the Saturdays already scheduled. We will have a much larger pool of folks who can work on Saturday besides just the CSI teams, precisely on the basis of what you're saying.
And that still gets me to March of 2016?
Well, it's a larger pool.
You're going to get it done sooner, aren't you?
No.
And then you're going to come in and surprise us and say, guess what? We got it done sooner.
2 weeks from now.
And I just told you how you...
Don't you like good surprises?
I better. All right, colleagues, any additional questions or comments?
I just want to...
Mr. Cedillo?
Follow up. Mr. Chairman, that's an excellent idea, and I'm sure that Mr. Saldivar took it to heart. I just wanted to follow up. Mr. O'Farrell had talked about the condos, and I recall that I had submitted a motion that instructed the collection from the condos. Mr. O'Farrell's concerned about the fiscal costs of that, but I'd like to get a report back on that so that we have a sense of both what we've done there and then what the expenses and costs, unanticipated or anticipated as they were, with respect to that.
Very good. And I had asked for your kindness in giving us until May to give you a thorough report. May.
And then the other part is, back to this discussion Mr. Fuentes was pointing out, I do recall in the last meeting that even independent of today we're going to move to give you 100% authority or to hire to 100%. The discussion last week was below your structured savings that your team had indicated that you had 400 vacancies. And so, let me encourage you, whether now today we're going to go to authorize you to go to 100%, but that you really move forward to both fill the vacancies and to move forward with these plans and suggestions Mr. Fuentes has laid forth. A great, opportunity to augment your plan. I appreciate your plan. It's thorough. It's measured. You're optimistic about the accountability for it, and so we look forward to April to seeing a great sparkling city. But at any moment, should you not feel confident that we're going to make those marks, you have suggestions here that I think that will
absolutely
be of value to the department and the city.
He knows he's got a big cleanup campaign coming up in the spring of.
Mr. Carruthers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Probably not as big a problem in my district as some of the others, except for a couple weeks a year when UCLA shuts down, and then every single property has a bunch of junk in front of it. And I don't know how you respond to that typically, if you just respond to the locations that people complain about, but obviously that's an area that should be handled the same way, just blitz it block by block.
We do that quite a bit, actually. We know in the semester, and we do have proactive sweeps in that area during those times.
So we don't wait for them to call. It's just pre-schedule as a sweep.
Good. One question, which is, how did we get in this mess to begin with? Was it because of the recession? Is this an ongoing problem that's always existed? Have we always had a backlog? How'd this play out? And is it getting better, getting worse? And do we expect it to be even worse once we get 311 up and running?
No, it's getting better. There was a huge service gap for a number of years. That's part of what we told you in the last hearing, that there was a good sizable service gap there from 2011, 2012, 2010, 2011, 2012 because of the recession. So we're making up for all that time. We have made incredible progress. I hope you see it in the neighborhoods and in parts of the city. Obviously more to be done, but yes, Mr. Cedillo, I am optimistic. I know that we can get this where you want it to be.
Let me just add something to that. The 2 CSI crews that we have deployed out there are picking up anywhere between 400 tons apiece, 400 to 500 tons apiece. That's every single month. That's 1,000 tons off the streets of Los Angeles, just those two teams. So It has to improve.
Pretty impressive. Well, as I say, not as big a deal in my district, but citywide, I think it's still a mess. I still see places that are crying out to be resolved. So I'm certainly going to support this very actively. And I think the whole council is concerned whether or not it's the biggest problem in their particular district. We want this to be a clean and healthy city, so we got to make it happen.
Mr. Blumenfield.
Most of my questions have been asked and answered, and the one topic that I wanted to bring up is on this topic, we haven't talked about it in this hearing, we talked a little bit about it last time around, which is sort of the education and compliance side of things. On the theory, no good deed goes unpunished, in the sense that we're going to go out, we're going to clean up all this stuff. People are going to say, hey, they pick up the dumping over there, that's the place where I dump, and they're going to continue to dump, and we make our problems worse. So a big part of this has to be, educational outreach. And I know part of the pilot, you're doing amazing and extensive outreach, and I want to give you a chance to talk about that a little bit and about the role that it needs to play and how things will be done differently on the education and compliance, so that, on the theory that large majority of the folks who are dumping are not necessarily doing it out of malice but out of ignorance, and that maybe with those who are doing it out of malice, when we have cameras and other compliance officers, like we have an additional officer in this mix here, we'll also get to them, and then we won't have the problem of creating a bigger problem by solving our problem when we remove things and people assume that it's okay.
Excellent point. And, we're going to invest the time and the resources with folks who have expertise in being able to drill down further into those behavioral kinds of things. I think everyone here would agree that a couch is blightful if it sits out on a day that it shouldn't be. But if it sits out on the street on collection day, on trash day, then we don't see it as blight. Same is true for the containers. We get complaints from folks who say, a neighbor down the street or somebody down the street has left their containers out for too long and they shouldn't be out. The only day that people expect these things to be out is on, what our expectation is, which is on trash collection day. The same is true of bulky items and any of the other stuff. So we cannot put in a process or a system that perpetuates it in a way in which it changes it from that expectation. So on your point, if we pick it up randomly on any time, any day, well, it may very well perpetuate the behavior that we're trying to change, which is don't just set it out any day, because then it does blight. It does create blight, because it's on a day that it's not supposed to be out. So we're going to invest the time with folks who can help us with that kind of behavioral correlation, so that we can design a robust education campaign that takes all of that into consideration. And we're going to begin with a pilot program in CD1, starting this week, with the development and focus groups and all the other stuff that comes with it.
Tell us a little bit more about, how much are we spending on that? I know we're hiring outside consultants. What's the ramp up of that?
It's it's a good investment, and the CIO alluded to it, because our goal is to get people to use the service that's available to them. So that we're funding it from our special funds, because we want people to use the services that we're providing. And so it's around $50,000, under $50,000 for the pilot program. But the campaign at large is going to be much bigger than that.
And what's the timing of scaling that?
We will have the pilot developed and rolled out by the early part of next year.
Thank you.
Okay, very good, colleagues. Hearing and seeing no additional questions, Mr. Prieto, this is a long set of recommendations. How shall we dispense with them?
Mr. Chair, yes, perhaps the best approach would be to approve the CAO report, which is for the most part all-encompassing.
Okay.
It also includes a recommendation, I think recommendation number 2, relative to the comprehensive strategy, which actually contains a review of the sanitation's policy recommendations. So you're, in essence, approving the CAO report with the policy components of the sanitation report.
Very good. And I want to make sure that we memorialize the point that Mr. O'Farrell made. The CAO report. That
yes.
yeah.
Relative to the amendment on the review of the condominium, the charges,
Yeah.
the multifamily bulk out and pickup. Certainly.
Okay, very good. All right, that shall be the order. Colleagues, hearing and seeing no additional business before the committee and no public comment cards, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.